the monumental power of the images that come to the foreground. Can you tell us something about your considerations about the concept of this film?
Well, as a filmmaker, I'm very excited by form, by cinematic form, and every subject, for me, sort of suggests a language for the film, and that's part. So that lots of what I'm sort of exploring or discovering through, lots of conversations and watching and research, and I'm sort of folding that back into the form of the film, particularly because I want it to be something that's immersive rather than explanatory. I mean, in the terms of visual art, of course, it doesn't come with explanation, and this is something which, this is a place that very few people would ever get to see. So, I like to make a document which, has a strong form that reflects what I feel is, integral to the subject. But, I like to leave the space for the response of the audience to the material itself. In a way, I think it's a very directly made film. And I also love observational documentary as a process, because it reveals, I think, a lot if you're sensitive to reading images and moments, and so, yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know whether there's more, and I could go on for a long time, but there's probably other questions that you and the audience want to ask. So,
do you believe it is possible to fully capture such an artwork in film, or is in this process always something gained or maybe lost, or what would be the gain or the loss in this staging?
Well, certainly, it's not, what you make isn't going to be the same as the experience of going there, and so it is, determined by the contingent events of when you're filming. A lot is out of your control, so you sort of, you're like seizing what you can and seeing what's exciting, and you couldn't visit Barjac in this way. For a start, obviously he wouldn't be there, but also you couldn't go down the tunnels and go up to in the pavilions. You couldn't fly through the space in the way that the camera allows you to in the film. And it's a kind of, compared to the 15 years that he spent there, and this is obviously like a postage stamp. But that said, I feel that it's also quite reduced, but there's a balance between how you reduce material and how you select. There's so many decisions you make, and even though you're not explicitly stating what those are, they're all there. And it's like, for instance, an example would be when I first started filming. The very first material that I shot was actually when he's smelting the lead down the mudslide. And when I showed him that material, he said, yeah, no, the framing is nice, but just, can you get rid of all the people? Just, can you get all the people out? And, the more that I realized in that moment that he saw the place unpeopled. So that informs the way to, because also human beings for him occupy a small part. They're not the center of the universe. For him, this idea of man being sort of thinking that he's the center of the universe is a mistake, or is a hubristic position. So I deliberately start the beginning of the film without people, so that you feel the craving to see human beings for the comfort of that, and also language, words. I'm working with them like a material, like the materials in the film are either lead or sand, and they occupy different spaces within this labyrinthine location. So when you come to the bibliothèque, as much as it's information, it's also just simply language, spoken language as another material. So I'm playing with, as I say, it's form that excites me, how form can reveal the complexity within a subject.
Could I ask a question, please? Exactly, language-wise, you say you don't speak German, so how did you manage to get along with him? I mean, if you come, I understand that you got there 7 weeks, then left again.
Sorry?
How did you manage to get in touch with him if you don't speak German or his English is not best?
I mean, well, how did I get in touch with him?
Yeah, I mean, it's a deeper relationship, isn't it? If you want to show it all, it's not something superficial where it's just words.
Yeah, I mean,
You see the German notes that are very important on the walls, etc. And you show them in the film, so someone must have translated them.
Yeah, I did go for I did a German course at the Goethe Institute in London. Yeah.
I thought so.
But you know, obviously it's a far cry from being able to speak German, and I worked with someone who translated everything for me, and you know, then I had subtitles over all of the material that I had, so then I worked with that. But I kind of just.
It's very difficult to get that all together, and get the feeling for him.
Yeah, but he does speak English, but I think that the thing about it is that, I mean, one of the parallels is that when I worked with Peter Greenaway, the film director, who worked with Sophie Fiennes, who didn't speak English, and Greenaway didn't speak French, but they collaborated very well because there's the urgency of what's in between you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you kind of, you know, there's not much space for small talk. And in a way, I mean, you know, for me, the frustration, you know, I would have, if I had spoken German, you know, I think that, you know, it would have felt like, you know, I felt frustrated personally. But then, you know, that was why, when in reading, I discovered that, you know, in all the catalogues, he likes to do these conversations with people. It's part of his catalogues. And I read a lot of them. The Guggenheim retrospective, it's all interviews with different people. And he tends to speak in aphorisms when he's interviewed. And so when I came across a conversation with this Klaus Dermotz, I actually just sort of felt that there was a different kind of dynamic in their dialogue. And even though Klaus isn't a kind of polished interviewer that you might see on TV, in film terms, he's like a character. So the thing is that he was actually doing a book of conversations for Surkamp. So he's already in a dialogue. And, you know, although it's a sort of strange dynamic, I equate it to the fact that Klaus wanted to be a priest, but Kiefer wanted to be a bishop. And so there's this kind of interesting relationship, male relationship going on. But nonetheless, you know, I felt like I wanted to have a space where he spoke in German. Because I think that if you're not German particularly, you have a sense of him that's quite limited if you see him only speaking French or English. And even that's a kind of, then that becomes for me a point of storytelling to kind of allow who he is in the film to suddenly take a new turn when you see him open up in his own language, having seen him be, you know, working with his assistants in France. So in that way, you know, I sort of, yeah, I try to make the most of my limitations. And, you know, necessity is the mother of invention.
Weitere Fragen?
Can you talk about the music? Because you say you don't use many words because you want to leave freedom for imagination, and then you have this very loud, dominant, iconic dominant music.
Yeah, there's something, I'm concerned by the fact that people feel the music's too loud, because this didn't happen until I don't know whether there's something about the level that it's being set at in the cinemas, because it wasn't a response. But I mean, the music is strong, of course. It's a strong choice. But I think it should, for me, it works in parallel to the images in the way that a silent film might have a musical accompaniment running alongside it, because you couldn't have 38 minutes of footage and whatever you would put on would do something. Silence would say a lot. And whatever you would choose to do is going to have some effect. So, you know, in finding this Ligeti music that is actually fascinating in how it's built, is it's built with layers of chords, and they're sustained chords, so they stretch the musical time in the way that time, you know, is sort of suspended within this layer in the film. And in fact, the music statique that Ligeti composed was drawn from looking at an image, a still image. In fact, it was a Paul Klee painting, but also influenced by the idea of the sea as being one fixed image with undulations working within it. So, you know, for me, this music had an interesting dialogue. Also, both artists, composer and Anselm Kiefer, are both artists from the second half of the 20th century, which and informs, I think, the tone of their work. It's not, this music doesn't have melody, it doesn't have rhythm, it doesn't have the elements that gives music the sort of feeling of emotional drive and safety. There's an ambiguity in the music that I like, because on the one hand it's daunting and difficult, on the other hand there's the sense that there's something also quite sublime within it. It has two aspects in it for me, and I think that those are also present in Kiefer. There's this beauty, but there's this complete destruction and ruin. So, and Kiefer himself liked the music as sound. He responded to it as sound, and there's a hardness in his work, which I think also so these are all my subjective responses to the music and why I felt that was what's right. But it shouldn't feel so loud. I mean, there's the difficulty within the music if it's, atonal and things like that. But it shouldn't feel mixed too loud. I mean, that concerns me. But it's not something that I've heard until now with this Blu-ray projection. I wonder if there's a problem there, whether there's something happened in that, because it wasn't in, when we screened it before, it's not been a factor that it feels that it's too loud.
What was your personal particular fascination about Anselm Kiefer? How did this project become? How did it become real?
Yeah. Well, I first came across his work when I was about 22. And I saw it in London at the Riverside Studios, and it was The High Priestess, this piece, I can't pronounce it in the German. I think when you've seen his work physically, it's very affecting. It's monumentality and the sort of the weight of it in all senses of the word is very affecting. So then I was always sort of following when he had shows. His gallery then was the Anthony Doffer Gallery in London. And then I was also introduced to him because I was working with a choreographer who had done work with the Doffer Gallery. So I met him on a few occasions. And then, suddenly out of the blue, he called me and through his gallerist. And the gallerist then called me back and said, would you think about making a film about Barjac, because he's leaving it. And he really wants a document of it, it was in fact him. He invited me to go to Barjac to see whether there was a film that I would want to make there, or what would I. It was a sort of instinctive invitation, I think. So I had followed his work, I was intrigued and I'd heard about this place, but I hadn't heard enough to not be completely amazed when I got there. So my first conversation with him was this thing of saying, that television, because he said that people are always coming and they want to film and they want to do something and they start and they hate what they do and I have to stop it. And that was when I sort of felt that cinema was the place where it was going to get closer to his sense of what his work is about, rather than the limitations of what a television documentary might propose. So for me as a filmmaker, of course, it was a very exciting challenge to sort of think how to document this big sprawling space, half of it's underground. He didn't intend originally to be in the film. I had to sort of persuade him that that was really exciting. But once he got beyond the kind of anxiety of being filmed, he then got excited by the sort of sense of the actions within his process that he makes that wouldn't otherwise be seen. So I think that got him creatively very engaged in it, and he worked very collaboratively in the shooting. In the editing, I completely was, he didn't come to the edit at all, and I had final cut and things like that, which was very important for me.
is he satisfied with the outcome? Does he like your film?
But he said, "Your film is good. It'll only be great if I make it now." That's what he said after the Cannes Film Festival. But I think that's kind of that's because for him nothing is ever finished. He wanted me to carry on and on and on making the film forever, really. But seriously, I cut it for about 8 months. I sent him a rough cut. He called me very excited. And then I went to Paris and I watched it with him. And then there were a few specific things that he wasn't happy about, and they were understandable if that would, it was things that I felt, were, like for instance, shots where the work had just literally been not even assembled at all. He felt that it looked like it was maybe work, but it wasn't. It was just the material in preparation for him to work with it, things like that. In fact, there was also some music in the middle section by another composer, and he wanted me to, he said, "Can't you find more ligety?" Because he liked, he heard the music as sound. And then, from that moment on, then I, just completed it. But, as I say, he would have wanted me to continue, going for it be an ongoing thing. But I always, when we embarked on making the film, I said, "Look, we'll make the material, I'll make a film." He considers this very much my film. So I said, "Well, you can go and make your film with the material." That was always fine by me from the outset. I like to make a document, and the raw rushes should serve as that.
Why do you think he asked you to conserve this place, Barjac? Because his work is much about decay, about ruins. The title is "Over Your Cities, Grass Will Grow," and that is what happens right now. Why do you think it was so important for him to have this film made?
Well, I think understandably, he's created something that he's leaving, and it is all those things you say, but also, it's a work that might not exist in the same way ever again. So, to make a document of it, I think is understandable, even though it's documenting something which reflects decay and something that's a process of dereliction that's changing all the time. So this is only one moment. I mean, it could be that in 10 years' time someone else goes and makes a film, and I don't know what it'll be like Angkor Wat before they took away all the growth. But I mean, he's excited by how it will change, so it's good to document it now. And I think that he's not someone who's been filmed at great length, but he's also part of a generation before the artists now who are very much PRing themselves, and that made it exciting to feel that you're making something that's not been, it's felt like it was, I don't think that he would be wanting to be filmed all the time. It's not, it's a sort of, it was a little window opportunity that opened up, and so I sort of jumped in there, really.
Gibt es noch weitere Fragen aus dem Publikum? Okay. I would just have one more question. I just mentioned before that you made a portrait of Slavoj Žižek, another very charismatic man. Do you see any relation between these very charismatic two men you portrayed, or how they?
I mean, the only thing that makes them similar is that they're men.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very, very, very different people. And again, I was documenting Slavoj's thinking rather than him himself, in a way that this is as much about a location as it's about Anselm Kiefer. So yeah, I mean, when you make work with these kinds of subjects, you're very quickly going to quite exciting places. I feel that they're exciting places to go to. It's like an elevator that takes you quickly to a really amazing vantage point. I try to make a film that speaks to at that level in the ideas, rather than having to start from the ground up, which is my frustration with so much documentary that's made for television that you have to start as if the audience knows absolutely nothing about anything. In fact, I think to see this film, you don't really even have to know anything about Anselm Kiefer. And I discovered that in the film world, you know, he's not known at all. I mean, when I got to the Cannes Film Festival with the film, you know, no one, it really shocked me how unknown he was beyond the art world. So, you know, I think in that sense it's good to make a film that then carries that work to an audience. And, you know, my feeling is that you only have to have, you know, made a construction in the sand and seen the water pull it away and pull it apart to understand what this film is about.
Okay, maybe one personal question. You're coming from an artist family. Your father is a photographer, your mother as a writer and painter, and all your siblings. How does that contributed to your development as an artist? Is that difficult or maybe challenging sometimes?
No, I mean, I think that, you know, if you come from a family where they're making amazing patisserie, and then you really know how to make an amazing millefeuille, because that's what you've been taught, that's what you know. So, you know, for me, I grew up in a family where, you know, certainly on my mother's side, she came from a fiercely academic family, but she was the kind of mad one who wasn't academic, but was actually more kind of brilliant in it, but she was hysterical in the real classic sense. You know, she couldn't be contained by proper education, and but she had a passion for ideas, and she had a passion for kind of creative, you know, work. And so, you know, that's, of course, the environment that you grow up in affects who you become and where you're, you know, where you want to, you know, where you want to go. So I think that, you know, I feel very lucky, because it's not like I have siblings who are all, you know, accountants or bankers or, you know, people who aren't interested in having a conversation about what I might be doing. Is like that I can talk to them about what they're doing. So, you know, it works fine.
Gibt's noch Fragen vielleicht jetzt?
I would finally like to know, I heard you're doing a sequel to The Pervert's Guide to Ideology. When will it be coming out?
Well, we filmed it, most of it, and so the editing process will probably take, because I have a 14-month-old baby, so I'm not able to work full-time. I don't want to work full-time. So I'm hoping that it will be finished a year from now. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Okay. Ja, dann würde ich sagen, vielen Dank, dass Sie alle hier waren. Ich möchte noch kurz darauf hinweisen, dass der Verleih Sie gleich noch einlädt zu einem Freigetränk draußen im Foyer, wo wir uns vielleicht auch noch mal ein bisschen näher unterhalten können oder vielleicht noch ein paar Fragen stellen können. Ja, dann bedanke ich mich sehr herzlich. Thank you so much for being here and all the best for your future projects.
Thank you.